I give the call to the honourable member for Longman.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak to the Schools Assistant Amendment Bill 2011. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Schools Assistant Act 2008 currently provides for the funding arrangements for non-government schools to be continued upon implementation of the national curriculum by the 31st of January 2012. With the legislation as it now stands, if the curriculum is not implemented by the stated date, the Australian Government could require reimbursement of these funds. The proposed amendment repeals the implementation date of the 31st of January 2012 and replaces it with a standing regulation that takes into account the staged development and implementation of the national curriculum. The Ministerial Council for Education, Early Childhood and Youth Affairs will determine new timelines. Mr Deputy Speaker, when the initial legislation was drafted in 2008, it was anticipated that the national curriculum would be finalised and ready to be rolled out by the beginning of 2011. However, Mr Deputy Speaker, the government underestimated the complexities of the task at hand, and the national curriculum is far from finalised. Like most programs developed by this Labor government, the development of the national curriculum has been poorly managed. The Coalition is supportive of the principle of an Australian curriculum. However, the final version has not been approved, and most jurisdictions will not begin its implementation until 2013. The legislation therefore needs amendment. It should be noted that the Coalition attempted to make these amendments in March this year, but at that point the Minister seemed unaware that there would be a problem. Mr Deputy Speaker, in 2008, Education Ministers adopted the Melbourne Declaration on Education Goals for Young Australians. The declaration affirmed that, I quote, and as I quote, "As a nation, Australia values the central role of education in building a democratic, equitable and just society, a society that is prosperous, cohesive and culturally diverse, and that values Australian Indigenous culture as a key part of the nation's history, present and future." It further affirmed that schools play a vital role in promoting the intellectual, physical, social, emotional, moral, spiritual development and well-being of young Australians and ensuring the nation's ongoing economic prosperity and social cohesion. Mr Deputy Speaker, these have been the guiding principles that have informed the development of the national curriculum, and as far as guiding principles are concerned, they are admirable in their intent. However, Mr Deputy Speaker, the requirement to amend this legislation highlights delays in the rollout of the curriculum and concerns associated with its development that have not been addressed. The fact that this Parliament needs to consider this bill is evident that the Labor government has not delivered on its commitment. In April 2008, the Labor Prime Minister promised a national curriculum publicly available and which can start to be delivered in all jurisdictions from January 2011. 1 year ago, during the election campaign, the Labor Prime Minister said, "This nation talked about a national curriculum for 30 years. I delivered it." The documents are still far from ready, Mr Deputy Speaker, and there continue to be significant concerns with the process. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Australian Curriculum, Assessment and Reporting Authority are continuing to develop the national curriculum. The initial consultation on the K to Year 10 documents for English, Math, Science and History occurred between March and May of last year. Comments were incorporated and further consultation with expert educators was undertaken. The Labor government is planning to present a final draft to Education Ministers in October of this year for approval at Ministerial Council. A similar process has been followed for the senior curriculum and its development is continuing. However, Mr Deputy Speaker, as mentioned, there have been a number of issues associated with the development of the national curriculum. The first of these is that there was an inadequate representation of the non-government sector on the relevant subcommittee reporting to the Ministerial Council. Mr Deputy Speaker, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, in 2010, 71% of schools in Australia were public schools, with the remaining 29% Catholic or independent schools. In the same year, the total number of students in Australian schools increased by 26,071, with 63% of that figure comprising private school students. Since 2000, the number of students in private schools has increased by 21%. Whereas the number of students in public schools has only increased by 1%. Mr Deputy Speaker, given these figures, is it not unreasonable to expect that a sector that is currently servicing a third of our children and is growing should have a voice on the subcommittee? Parents are voting with their feet, Mr Deputy Speaker, and exercising their right to choose where and how their children are educated. In the Coalition, we support the right of parents to choose which school their children should attend. We believe that the independent sector should be maintained as a viable choice for as many parents as possible. We also recognise that every child that is in the private system is a child that is not placing a burden on taxpayer-funded public education. Freedom of choice is a key Liberal value, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it is one that many members of my community have exercised when choosing schools for their children. In this context, we believe that the independent school sector should also have a strong voice on the subcommittee reporting to the Ministerial Council, and the sector should also have a say in the decisions regarding implementation timeframes. Mr Deputy Speaker, the nature of the curriculum documents themselves has also been questioned. The Labor government's curriculum documents lack clarity of direction and an overarching framework. We are concerned that there is too much ideology driving the content of this curriculum. For example, there is a predominant focus in Indigenous and Asian culture without the weight being given to British heritage or our Judeo-Christian traditions. This raises serious concerns about the balance and the content that is going to be taught in our schools. In addition, Mr Speaker, there are concerns that the national curriculum is overcrowding, meaning that many schools will be left without flexibility to deliver programs that correspond with the particular philosophy, for example, in the area of the arts. There is also an excessive focus on content rather than the development of essential critical and creative thinking skills for students. Furthermore, the documents appear not to have enough flexibility to cater for children who require additional support for those who are particularly talented. Issues have been raised regarding the science curriculum documents, for example, which are purported to be so difficult that students may actually be discouraged from studying the sciences. This would be a terrible outcome, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, the other concerns with the national curriculum separate from the document themselves lies in how it is to be implemented. Teachers have expressed serious concerns with regards to the support they receive as the curriculum is rolled out. The Federal President of the Australian Education Union said recently, "We are seriously worried by the absence of any funding to support the implementation." Mr Deputy Speaker, the union should be concerned. This government's track record at delivering a program is absolutely abysmal. Think pink bats. Think school halls. The national curriculum is far too important to go the same way as these failed programs. A rollout without the necessary training and support for our teachers, who will have to deliver the content, is a recipe for the disasters that have become the hallmark of this Labor government. In order to go some way towards dealing with a couple of these issues, we urge members opposite to support the amendments the Coalition is moving. The first of these will underscore the importance of ensuring that schools and teachers receive the support and professional training they require in order to effectively implement the curriculum. The second amendment will ensure that the independent school sector receives representation and is consulted regarding the timelines associated with the implementation of the curriculum. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Coalition supports the legislative amendment proposed by this bill, in recognition that the implementation of the national curriculum is going to take much longer than originally anticipated and is yet another failure and a Labor broken promise. A 3-year implementation for Phase 1 of the Australian curriculum commencing this year, with implementation by 2013, is likely. However, a time frame for the Phase 1 of the senior secondary curriculum is yet to be agreed. Furthermore, updates to the curriculum will be required from time to time. The amendment is designed to provide a mechanism whereby the staged introduction and any amendments can be accommodated. However, Mr Deputy Speaker, there are worrying deficiencies in the process. There is no non-government sector representation on the Australian Education, Early Childhood Development and Youth Affairs Senior Officials Committee, which reports to the Ministerial Council, and there is no plan to support teachers and schools in the implementation of the curriculum are areas of significant concern. The Coalition's amendments will address these issues.